All right. I think we can get started here. Very excited to welcome everyone. Helen, do you want to jump in and say something before we get started here, or do you want me to just intro this?
I would love to say a quick hello. I
Please.
know there's a few of our AD community members here, so so great to meet you all. I'm Helen. I'm on Alumni's Ventures platform team. We probably have cross paths, but hopefully we will be able to put together more of these series for you guys. But I'll pass off the floor to David.
Excellent. Thanks, Helen. Yeah,
Mhm.
Alumni Ventures has been a great partner to us. So very excited about this webinar today, hosted by Dune Security and Alumni Ventures. The topic for today is redefining the GRC function, leading the shift beyond checkbox security training. I'm joined here today by Meghan Hunt. Meghan Hunt is the cyber risk analyst at the University of Vermont Health System. Jake Wesenberg, who is the cybersecurity program lead at Koch, formerly known as Koch Industries, and Sam Pena, who is a senior GRC manager at Tetra Tech. I will pass to our panelists to just say a quick hello.
Hi, I'm Meghan Hunt. I work for IT risk and resilience for the University of Vermont Health. We used to be the Health Network, and now we're just University of Vermont Health. Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Jake Wesenberg. I've been in some sort of IT or security role for a little over 20 years now. Been at Koch for about 12 and leading the awareness program for the last 5.
Hi, Sam Pena. I support a few government organization through Tetra Tech as one of their senior GRC managers.
Excellent. Thank you to our panelists for joining today. So, for quick context, the goals of today's conversation are the following. The first is to discuss what has really changed in the cybersecurity threat landscape, especially over the past year. How are social engineering attacks really dominating the cybersecurity conversation? And then how have traditional training and compliance models fallen short from a GRC perspective? And then how can organizations redefine readiness and prove measurable cybersecurity risk reduction in 2026? My first question is for Jake Wesenberg. So, Jake, beyond what can you tell us a little bit about how the user attack surface has shifted over the past year? And can you share maybe some specific examples or attack patterns that you've seen in the wild? Obviously, you can might not be able to mention things within Koch's exact environment, but what have you and colleagues at other companies and partners at other companies seen?
Yeah, so I'll throw out the disclaimer. I'm going to speak in generalities and nothing necessarily specific of Koch's viewpoint on whatever.
That's right.
I really think in the last year, we've sort of seen the culmination of a trend that's been going on for 5, maybe even 10 years of a lot of the traditional items that we're trying to upskill individual people on, misspellings and, hover over the text. A lot of that's kind of been going away as good examples. But then also the tech stack has been developing and our protection tools have been developing quite a lot to the point of sorry. I don't need it. Thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
The tech stack's been developing quite a lot to the point that we really don't even see that one click is going to sync the entire company anymore. So that messaging really has a strong need to fade away. And inversely, we're seeing the biggest area where all we can do is awareness. We don't have tools that can mitigate those risks is outside of our environment. So WhatsApp, Signal, SMS, these are the things where we need to really put a lot more focus. And we're definitely seeing across the industry very targeted attacks, very convincing attacks, even with people who are familiar with the person being imitated.
Tell me a little bit more, Jake, just on that point. If you could, you mentioned that it's not just one click that could take down an entire company. And I think you were kind of alluding to how the attacks are changing. It's maybe not just email, right? So maybe could you dive a little deeper and maybe what's the most surprising type of attack that you've heard about at least in other companies?
So yeah, I heard recently about something that started on WhatsApp, and the individual was suspicious, and they said, "Can we do a video call?" Because they wanted to, is this really who I think I'm talking to? And the attacker got on a video call, and it was of a high enough quality that this person who was familiar with the person being imitated thought they had done their due diligence in verifying, yes, I talked to who I think I'm talking to. And it was only another second guess where they were like, this just doesn't sound right. And they reached out one more time on a different communication channel to validate. That stopped that from becoming an incident.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common as you see the attacks start on one channel and it could be any channel, right? We're in this omni-channel world. It could be starting on WhatsApp and then go to a video call. Could, I guess, theoretically be the opposite as well. And the other thing that's interesting there is WhatsApp is not a corporate messaging system typically, right? Typically that's just on someone's personal phone number. And AI is allowing the attackers to send these specific attacks across any channel much faster. Um, I will pass here actually to Megan. So my next question is to Megan, and looking at these types of attack patterns, where where have governance and compliance programs struggled to keep pace? What is what's really preventing these types of attacks so difficult from a GRC perspective, reporting up to the CISO? And just for context, typically, the GRC organization has kind of a legacy security awareness training tool. So in this world, Megan, I mean, if you think about it as a battle, are you showing up with the right tools and the right weapons to this battle?
I think overall, yes. I do think that we are learning kind of in the middle of a battlefield. So as I've equated it before, and my team has actually equated it before to, you're trying to plug the holes on a sinking ship. But you're just hoping to keep your head above water most days. We're definitely, healthcare its own kind of strange animal. We have this like immediacy versus security argument that happens sort of in the back behind the scenes, where, data immediacy can sometimes trump data security in the minds of certain people. But it's high functioning, it's high intensity, and a lot of the training that we had been looking at beforehand, it just wasn't working for us anymore. We weren't seeing the results that we were hoping to see when we were focusing on, training our users not to click on things. So one thing that we've tried to move away from in that legacy kind of training and awareness is to focus on reporting. We're trying to get our users to report instead of not click. So that's the biggest thing for us.
Makes perfect sense.
Jump in on that. That's exactly where we've been putting a lot of our focus. And one of the parts of that made a lot of sense to me learning about from a psychologist is it's 1,000 times maybe more easier to teach somebody what to do rather than teach them what not to do.
Yes.
I love the analogy. You tell people don't think about a pink elephant, and they will immediately think about a pink elephant.
Don't look behind you, and they immediately
Right.
look behind
And they
you.
immediately look behind you. Now you do tell them to think about a blue elephant, and then that's what they're thinking about. So it's so
Right.
much easier to tell somebody if it feels off, just report it. That's the thing to
Yeah.
do is report, not all this list of inspect and sandbox and whatever, look at headers, whatever else we might have to get into with how sophisticated things are getting.
I think too in healthcare, like our users are incredibly busy. And so they're taking 5 minutes out of their day to check their email in between running from patient to patient, clinician to clinician. And in 5 minutes, you might accidentally click on something that you shouldn't. So if your habit is to just delete or report, then we're fine with that. That makes us happy. Just don't click. That's the one thing we want our users not to do.
Yeah, Megan, in healthcare, we see a lot of doctors, clinicians, And it's similar to other
Yes.
types of roles, but their job is literally to help, right? And so
Yeah.
if they're getting some sort of message, and it's
Yeah.
social engineering, they're actually pretty easy targets from that because of that dynamic.
Yeah, they definitely prey on that desire to help people and
Yep.
to, make things
The,
easier for people.
the hero mentality.
Yes.
Megan, you mentioned, tell me more about the tools, right? So when you're looking at the current space and you're dealing with complex roles like a doctor, or clinician, or someone with PHI, right, in that healthcare system, for
Yeah.
example. What have you really been thinking about in terms of types of awareness, types of training? What are really the innovations that you and others who are in similar roles as you are looking for?
So we actually started looking for something that would make our lives easier on the back end. We put a lot of time and effort into crafting, training, and awareness every couple of months. And it was just a drag on resources, unfortunately. So we've moved now to like an automation AI kind of system where we give prompts, and in doing so, the emails go out for us. We don't have to do any of the monitoring. We don't have to do any of the cataloging. And that actually just started today. So we've sent out our first campaign now on this new program, and I don't have any results for you, obviously, but I can tell you that already I don't have an inbox full of angry messages from people, and that's a huge help to me.
That's great. And for Sam and Jake, also feel free to chime in after each piece too. Um, Excellent. So I'll direct this next question to Sam. So, what unique influence do GRC leaders have in really connecting compliance evidence and sort of those requirements, those minimum requirements for compliance to real world cybersecurity resilience? So, kind of moving that checkbox into a more, risk reducing or risk management posture.
Thank you for that question, David. Um, I think we have to, as GRC champions, essentially, be those who translate the risk, the take the information security aspect of it, and then being able to translate that into a risk language for the boards and the execs to understand better. It could be stating like, here's how we could lose potential customer trust, or how much it would be in fines and penalties if we were to be um, lacking um, in a privacy aspect, like in the United States for CCPA or any other of the state legislations, um, or just the potential of how much would be lost in the event that there would be a breach, and how long is that going to take us to recover. Um, I think that's one of the things that we have to that's uh, to focus on.
Tell me a little bit about, just building on that, Sam. How does the GRC leader and cybersecurity leaders, how do you get attention of let's say the CEO of the company or the board?
Um, Honestly, from my perspective, I typically have someone else to champion for me, someone who's actually on the board. There, I've tried in different instances where it's trying to get that ear, and I'm still learning how to speak board. Um,
Same.
but yeah, like this is a big problem. How come? Because
Mhm.
of X, Y, and Z. Like, oh no, we've got to give me numbers, giving them numbers and being able to understand that. Having a CISO who will back you with what you believe in and what you're trying to explain and trying to push forward is the key thing, I feel, to getting that penetration into the boardroom and being able to make the right moves for security.
It also really helps if you experience a massive cyber event, uh, which we did in 2020. So like that was a really easy way to get board members on board with what we wanted,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yeah,
yeah,
sometimes those
Sorry.
budgets are dramatically increasing after some sort of event, and in the absence of an event, sometimes it's impossible. That's kind of what we hear.
I think if you can find what are the key metrics and KPIs really that the board is most interested in, and then you can work back, how does missing these controls potentially impact those metrics?
Yeah.
It can become very easy for them to understand. And you kind of skip over a lot of the middle. You start with, hey, here's the control tool, whatever we need to put in place. And here's how not doing that could directly impact this KPI.
Jake, question for you. So, cybersecurity is kind of a hard, it's kind of a hard industry, right? Because unlike if you're building a company, right, it might be easier to build a company that's increasing revenue for your customers. Cybersecurity, it's kind of, it's the opposite, right? You're reducing money lost, right? You're reducing risk. So how do you prove resilience? How do you prove risk reduction to, boards, to regulators, to the CISO? How can GRC leaders deliver this quantifiable risk reduction?
Yeah, I think it's finding what are those most important metrics that they pay attention to and trying to work those back into what are you doing, and how does that translate. Now, that's in a lot of cases a lot easier said than done. But that's the opportunity there is to find that set of connections all the way back and be able to point to some real world examples to say, we had this happen once in the past 5 years. Without these controls, that could have happened 20 times in the last 5 years. So we can take the financial impact from that one event, multiply by 20, and now we have a number to work from. A lot of it, if you can get all of the right information, ends up becoming a simple formula. The first part is getting the right information to start with.
Another question here in the chat from Joseph. So we're talking about the live video call incident. So, and I think, Jake, you had brought this up, but when there's a hybrid attack or a multi-channel attack, and perhaps there's some sort of like AI avatar or a deep fake on a Zoom call or on a Zoom. So question here for the panelists. I'd love to understand, how would you address that type of the AI is moving so quickly, the developments in AI. How would you address that exact type of incident? How would you prevent against a deepfake attack?
Ours was somewhat simple. Now, there's always nuance and asterisks to this. But it was, what's the least common denominator here? We can tell everybody. WhatsApp and these other channels just are not approved communication channels for conducting business over. You might use those to get somebody's attention and say, hey, I sent you a Teams message. Can you respond? I sent you an email. Can you respond? So part of it is getting back into those approved communication channels where we do have a lot more controls. Now, sure, the imitation might continue in those areas, but that's where we now have tool sets that can watch for lookalike domains, lookalike names, can prevent communication with somebody outside the Teams tenant, things like that.
Any from Sam or from Meghan?
I would suggest, in the event that it's a video call and it's being generated by AI, having them, it might be silly, but just having the person put their hand in front of their face, or having them move the camera around to show something different. Just because I know right now, with the technology itself, it can't not compute that, but like it generates something like that as quickly. So like just being able to put the hand in front of the face, you could still see like the gaps between the fingers, or just the small discrepancies from what I've been noticing.
What about any like deepfake detection, right? There's kind of two ways to, have you guys thought about deepfake detection tooling?
That certainly could be part of the stack, especially if someone is initiating an external call from an actual like enterprise level account. Let's say we have a vendor compromise or a customer compromise. I think that's the specific area where those kinds of detections are where we need to start relying on. Yeah.
I want to go into our next question. So for GRC leaders at big companies, what are kind of the best strategies for enabling true resilience across the organization, right? There's this move from enforcing compliance to actually reducing risk. What are some of the best strategies, right? And a couple I can think of are the carrot versus the stick. As kind of simplistic answer there, but what are some of the best strategies? What have you seen work in your organizations for actually enabling true resilience?
I'll go for this one. Um, Effective training, to be honest, that's tailored for time and title. Um, Title being like you're gonna have a baseline, obviously a baseline understanding of what security you want to teach and train for. But then having that essentially modules for your DBA, for your director, for your CISO, um, for HR, and so on and so forth, and just having the different things that they can look at. And I also feel that I, I truly push for, instead of having your annual refresher, break it down to a quarterly refresher. And I also really appreciate the times where, like at a previous position, around the holiday season, just because it's just happened, um, pushing for not the organization or the industry that you're in, but just personal information security. Understanding when there is like a credit card, like understanding how to protect yourself with online shopping, spoofing, so on and so forth, and then being able to tie that into like, oh, here are some other things that you can take this not application, but these lessons learned from your real world, from your like home life, and apply it here to your office setting. That really helped a lot for, and I feel like it was also appreciated and built that relationship out with my not customers, but my coworkers.
Yeah, I
There's
agree.
one thing. Sorry, go ahead, Megan.
The training and awareness piece is really important. The targeted training and awareness piece. I think there are certain things that are general and are fine for everybody, but then not everybody who, works in clinical needs to understand how direct deposits work, right? And like how to be careful about direct deposits. So we see occasionally we have requests come in for, targeted training for teams that have experienced maybe a business email compromise attack recently, or have seen an uptick in requests for things that are shady and suspicious. So I think it's, as Sam said, it's really important that the training you're providing is targeted to the correct audience, because otherwise it's not doing the job it's supposed to do.
Phrase we use is only the information that's needed, only at the time that it's needed, only to the people who need to hear it. And so if you can do that, if you can say there's one message I need this specific group of people to know now, that has so much bigger impact than, well, we covered this with you 9 months ago. Why did you make this mistake? It's a lot easier if you say, oh, at the time of click, when they shared that document with external, and you can give them a Teams message or a Slack message or an email, that makes so much more of an impact to them. I think too, it's important to remember.
Bring your computer here. Bring your
Sorry, what's that?
computer here. I'm just working.
Sorry about
I think
that.
it's also important to remember the shift from extrinsic motivators to intrinsic. So external motivators, whether they're carrots or stick, can absolutely get somebody to do one thing one time. To get them to make that a behavior and to keep doing it, even when they're not being influenced, we have to help them understand the intrinsic value of that. How is that helpful to them? How does that lead them to be doing something good and positive in the environment? So one of the other things we do is we give people feedback after they've reported an email to let them know how many other people they protected by reporting that email instead of just deleting it.
I want to actually go to another question in the chat here from Ganesh. Really good question here from Ganesh. And then also from Kathleen, and we can kind of put them into one grouping. So when you're looking to quantify financial risk as it pertains to cybersecurity risk, how do you quantify that? Are you looking at cyber insurance claims and saying it's kind of like there's that study, which I believe is relative to selection bias, with that airplane in World War II, where the only bullets that you see are in the wings, and it's like, oh, why are people only shooting the wings? It's because the airplanes that went down, were shot in the middle, right? So the only ones recoverable, you just have the bullet holes in the wings. But yeah, I'd love to kind of understand, right? Even with selection bias potentially as a bit of a confusing a piece here. How do you quantify, cyber risk, right? It's much easier to quantify it when you actually have a loss or a breach, like Meghan said at her hospital network in 2020. But how do you quantify risk in the absence of some sort of attack or breach?
So to keep on with your analogy, and I'm going to skip over the last part of your question for just a second.
Sure, please.
But it's looking at the planes that went down. So when did you have an incident? And if you changed one or two variables, how many more incidents could you have had? So how many did you stop that were very similar, but had just one of your tools, not 3 or 4 or 5 of your tools, but one of your tools at the very last second was able to stop it? Do you have that data available to you? Can you pull that together? When you talk about the stuff that's never happened, the planes that have never gone down, and how do you figure out that? You've got to look at, the industry sources and things like that, but I would personally always put some sort of a qualifier on there that we're not using internal data to provide those numbers.
Anyone else from the moderator group? Jake, there's also a problem with looking at the planes that did go down, is a lot of them aren't reported, right? A lot of the companies pay the ransom. They don't want the bad press.
Yeah. So luckily, hopefully you can look at your internal planes that went down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or hopefully you do have partners who maybe they're not willing to publish something on a large scale, but they're willing to do conversations like this under Chatham House rules, and share just a little bit more information with people. I really do believe the industry luckily has been moving in this direction for quite a long time, but we're going to be stronger together. And so just a little more openness, a little more honesty, and sharing with each other in a secure and reasonable way is really going to help the entire industry, rather than everybody trying to put on a face of, nope, we've never been hit, we've never been attacked, and now, you don't have access to any of that data.
Makes perfect sense. Let's go to another question here. All right, so this is a tough one. So supply chain. Question here from V in the audience here. So the comment was, I believe GRC is more than cybersecurity. Geopolitics, supply chain all matter. The two main challenges in cybersecurity, besides awareness, are that management is aware of the impact, believes that it won't happen to them, and then the velocity of risk is becoming more important today. So yeah, really, really good point. And above impact and probability, it's, I came from a cyber insurance company, and it's very hard to model cyber risk because of how fast it's changing. And then, as AI is now, is actually breaking into companies, not just through social engineering, but also through, actual like technical attacks. Let's talk a little bit about the velocity of risk, and kind of back to my first question here, but how should cybersecurity and GRC leaders, and I'll open this one for Jake, or for Meghan or for Sam here. How should cybersecurity leaders deal with a threat landscape that's increasing, the risks are increasing, the pace of innovation of the risk of the attacks is increasing? How do you deal with that acceleration?
I think you've got to try to keep pace. We use the term rapid experimentation, fail fast. Your team and your leaders need to be on board with failure. that actually I got told something once by a senior leader on our team when I first came over to cybersecurity. He said, one of my only expectations for you is that you have at least one failure every year. If you don't fail at all, then you didn't push. And that's that was kind of eye-opening for me to say, okay, yeah, I do have the support to potentially fail. We may not be 100% sure that a new tool, capability, alert, what have you, is going to mitigate our risk. But in a lot of cases, we have to do the thing before we can get the data to support it.
I love that. Fail fast. From Megan and Sam, any other advice there?
One of the things I think we're trying to do is push for visibility. It's helping our user base and helping our C-suite and, our executives understand what the risks are and where the vulnerabilities lie and, giving insight into those things that they may not have otherwise. There's this idea that cybersecurity belongs to IT and that's it. And the reality is that it belongs to everybody. So that's part of what I've been doing with the training and awareness program is kind of pushing this. Everybody's a cybersecurity advocate as long as you're advocating for cybersecurity. So I think that, once you get a bigger understanding from your users and your champions and your stakeholders, I think that really helps push what you're trying to do forward.
Tried to champion anytime a business process was what actually stopped an attack. So it wasn't a cybersecurity tool, but it was a business process that says, we don't update banking information without a certified letter in the mail. Or we have to have 2 people from your company tell us that you want to place this order, or whatever those business processes may be. Those are part of our defensive stack. And so sharing those messages out and sharing those events out within the company of when did a business process serve its role as part of this defense stack, that's helped a lot of people to take some ownership and say, okay, yeah, I don't manage or do anything with those tools, but I do have some control over the cybersecurity posture of the company.
Exactly. Ownership is huge. If you believe you don't have ownership over something, you're not going to put any kind of effort into it.
So just to kind of recap what we've covered so far today, attacks are succeeding in very different ways than they were succeeding years ago. Threat actors often aren't looking to break different controls or different castle walls of cybersecurity across layers, network, email identity, endpoint. They're really manipulating people, or even scarier, finding malicious or complicit people on the inside. Actually, one question here on that front is how when you're running cybersecurity risk, often from the awareness or the testing or training perspective, how do you quantify, if you do today, how do you quantify insider threat risk versus social engineering risk? And how do you think about that within your companies today?
Oof.
It's tricky because hopefully you have fewer downed planes to look at. And similarly, those are the least likely to be shared, I think, across the industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a lot less data to go off from.
I mean, you would want to have at least some kind of DLP or set up restrictions or time management kind of applications in place to understand, like, why is this person online at 10:30 when they're typically, a 9 to 5 kind of person. I don't know, maybe having a behavioral analysis of a person might be helpful. I don't know how far we can go into that. Just based off of like just based off of employee privacy. But those are some things that I've considered.
I think the easy way is when something that's more secure is also easier. So, for example, conditional access, when we say, hey, everything lines up perfect, we don't need you to do MFA. But we join that with nothing looks right. So you're going to do MFA for every single action you're going to try to take. When we can do things like that, 99% of the time, the employees are seeing the easier side of it, not the harder side of it. And so they support it and they love it. So you may not need to show the risks that were mitigated. You can show instead efficiency gains.
I
Yeah.
think there's also the understanding that insider threat and social engineering kind of work together in ways that you can be a non-voluntary insider threat because of social engineering. So the idea that, you have to distinguish between good actors and bad actors within your company isn't really the point anymore, I think. It's more, how is somebody going to be manipulated into doing something that they shouldn't without realizing that they shouldn't?
And Megan, you bring up a good point. I mean, they're not differentiated, right? I think that these risks are deeply interconnected, and so I think kind of one of the core reasons why we built Dune is that these types of risks shouldn't stand alone, and you need to correlate these different types of data sources to really get a complete and accurate picture of user risk within the company, whether that's social engineering or insider threat.
Yeah, nothing survives in a vacuum. So,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Like a fish click percentage or something like that for us was never really a super valuable data point because it's independent from a lot of other data points that are very, very relevant to user risk. Um, all right. So I think we'll kind of start wrapping this up here. So we covered today a shift in how in attacks and how attacks are changing across different channels. Um, we talked about how organizations can still remain compliant, but can potentially, increase the efficacy of their current solutions. And then, how do we prove to boards, to regulators, to C-suites, how are we actually reducing risk? How do we quantifiably prove that risk reduction? And then how do we, in doing so, increase resilience across the company? So the GRC role is evolving quickly, and GRC teams need continuous visibility into user behavior, into testing outcomes across any channels, into real risk signals that are often informed by simulated attacks that could be as advanced as what the attackers are doing in the wild. And so, for us, the employees were a big part of the risk surface, but we talk about the user very specifically, and the user for us is becoming kind of the entire threat landscape for us, and the entire attack surface for the attackers, just by the sheer majority of attacks that are breaking in through the user base. So I'll actually start closing this up here, but any other parting comments from Sam, from Jake, or from Megan today for our audience?
Hit on one of the things you said about the metrics that you can get from running these simulations. One of the ones I look at most closely, and I know I've shared this with you, David, is who will tell on themselves. Who will click on a simulation or enter their credentials and then go back and report and say, I made a mistake and I need help. That number, I think, is a much better indicator of the risk level within your environment. If you can get that very high, very strong, there's a very good chance that you're going to be able to rapidly detect and respond to anything that happens because people across your company feel comfortable coming to the security team and admitting they need help. If that number is low or 0%, which is where it was when we started tracking it, then that's an issue because that means something can sit in the environment for hours or days before the security team finds out.
Yeah, we try to be really, well, I think we try to be really not shame based with our users. Shame doesn't really do anything. And there's this aspect of, you did a good job and we're really proud of you. Or, if somebody clicked and entered their information, it's like, it's okay. You know what not to do now. But I think that trying to be a little more I hate the word, but optimistic about it. With users and the way that they operate individually and as a group too. That can make metrics just numbers on paper sometimes because people are not numbers. So
Yeah, I echoing what Jake and Megan said. One of my bosses once said, "Bad news doesn't get better with time." Um,
I like
but
that.
yeah, so and also giving them the grace to understand, like, yeah, they're human. People are going to screw up.
Yeah.
Let's learn from this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much today, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Sam, Jake, Megan. Thank you so much for being the panelists. Thank you to Helen and Alumni Ventures for helping us to put this together. Um, it was a great conversation here, and we're really excited to continue to lead in user risk and awareness here at Dune Security.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.
Cheers.
Bye.